Justice Jim Sinclair.
Thank you very much. I really do want to start by saying a huge thank you to the society that put this on, because they did a hell of a job doing this today, but keeping that memory alive forever. So for those folks, thank you very much for your hard work. Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you very much. When Slim Evans stood in the place right over there, and they were having a meeting talking about what they should do next, and he said, "On to Ottawa." He set in motion a journey that would truly change the course of history in Canada. There were thousands of desperate young men who had decided long before that day to leave to do something about their lives. They had decided, in fact, that they were going to go on strike. The On to Ottawa trek was the final chapter in a year or two long organizing campaign in relief camps across Canada, not just in British Columbia. And when they walked off the job in April, they came from all over the province, and some of them came from as far away as Alberta to come to Vancouver to see justice. Their demands were simple. The slogan, work and wages. The details, they wanted 50 cents a day instead of 20 cents a day. They wanted to be treated fairly, because in the work camps, even though they were working, they were not covered by Workers' Compensation Board. They had no compensation coverage. If they were injured, it was too bad. They wanted something even more basic. They wanted first aid equipment in those camps, and there were none. It was also a democratic struggle, because part of the move by the government to attack the unemployed was when you went to the relief camp and you were forced there and often taken there by the police, you lost your right to vote. You were no longer a citizen in the eyes of the government of Canada. And they were demanding, of course, that they get the right to vote back. They marched in the streets. They were disciplined. They held demonstrations. And the thing that was so important was the people of Vancouver supported them. Even if the mayor didn't, I can tell you the people did. And it was actually the sit-in at the Carnegie Centre where McGeer had to actually come down and negotiate and gave them 2 days of relief pay for money for food. And when the police were preparing to go in there and take them over and kick them out physically, the leader of the Longshoremen's Union came up. And he went to the police and said, "If you go in there and you do that, then no one's working on these docks tonight, because we're bringing 1,500 people here to stop you from doing that." And the police actually thought it was a good idea that maybe they shouldn't go in and do that. So they did it, and those people marched out of there victorious and had a massive demonstration of the people and their supporters outside. They were successful. Some would suggest that they weren't. They were absolutely successful. And I know we'll be successful the day that when every human being and every Canadian who walks in and finds himself unfortunately unemployed and goes and gets unemployment insurance, they should be thinking about these people. Because it was these people that put it on the political agenda. No, they didn't get it the next year or the year after. It became a huge legal problem. But by the 40s, we got unemployment insurance. And it was a direct result of actions like this one, going to Ottawa and putting that on the political agenda. Now here's another little message for Stephen Harper if he doesn't get the message properly yet. The other thing that happened, of course, was that Bennett was defeated in the next election. In fact, the Conservatives were crushed across the country. And you know, it was a fitting end to that. And those trekkers deserve a lot of the credit for making sure that Canadians understood and knew what was happening to unemployed people, and they punished the government for trying to punish those people. And today, they're doing the same thing. Being unemployed is still a crime in this society. Being unemployed is still a disaster in this society. That unemployment scheme that those people fought for used to cover almost everybody, and now simply covers less than 50%. Those things need to be changed. And they're still blaming people, like they blamed the trekkers, like they called them communists. Some of them were, by the way. Like they called them indecent people. They took away their right to vote. All of those things were really about blaming them for the crisis. Why wouldn't they raise the wages? Because they said business couldn't afford to pay it. And what do we hear today? The same thing. It's our fault. The crisis is here. So what they did by rejecting the blame, by demanding to be treated by human beings, is fundamental to the things that we stand up for today and continue to fight for today. It's a wonderful legacy. I'm happy to be part of sending off a delegation of new trekkers going to Ottawa to say in so many words that having a home is a human right, that housing is a right, and that it is a national disgrace to have the homelessness that we have in this city and in this country. By inviting you to his publicly owned house that the Canadian people pay for, and maybe invites you in and feeds you some of that food that the Canadian people pay for so he can be fed. You know, Mr. Harper, you live in public housing. You live in public housing, Mr. Harper. And your only crime is that everybody in this country should also have a house, and if it has to be public, so be it, that everybody else should have the same right, Mr. Harper. So that when you go to bed tonight, Mr. Harper, you think about inviting these folks to your house that we all own, and you think about what you're going to do by implementing a national housing policy, the 1% housing policy, because Canadians will pay for it. Cut the taxes to corporations, build the houses, and let's remember that it's struggle and struggle that makes this world what it is today. And let's keep up that struggle. And thank you again to everybody who's here today. And thank you to those trekkers for keeping that spirit alive. Thank you.
Take a whole week at a time where they went on a hunger strike one at a time, and it's still continuing. So he's also going to be on the train tonight leading the delegation to Ottawa, to Hall.
Well, Stephen Harper is going to need that alarm bell once we get to Ottawa. And I want to echo what Libby and Jim were talking about. You know, we really, here in the downtown east side and the east side of Vancouver, we stand on the shoulders of social movements that came before us. If you look back at the history of Vancouver, before it was even incorporated at the city, right in the shores of what is today Crab Park was an Aboriginal village. And today that fight for social justice and land claims and redress goes on. In 1907, people marched down Pender Street and broke the windows in Chinatown. And for many, many years, people fought to get rid of the head tax and all of the discriminatory legislation against the Chinese community. In 1935, about the same time as the Ontario Trek, a few blocks east of here, there was a 3-hour battle between longshoremen and the police called the Battle of Valentine Pier. So that fight for justice and wages continues. During the Second World War, just a few blocks from here, the Japanese community was interned right here. And that fight for justice and redress continued for many, many decades. When government tried to push a highway through the heart of Strathcona, the community rose up and said no. In the 90s, when people were overdosing, people were pushing for harm reduction. The front pages of the paper used to say, "Junkies want a shooting gallery," and this community rose up and said, "This is a health and human rights issue." So we say clearly today that if we can spend $1 billion for Olympic security, if they can spend $1 billion for security for the G8 and G20, we can spend $1 billion for social housing in Canada. Today I want to thank someone who couldn't be with us today, Cecily Nicholson, who's the Administrative Director of the Downtown Eastside Women's Center, just went the last 7 days without eating on a liquid diet. It's the 75th week someone did this quietly across the city with very little media attention or interest from the papers. And so it didn't matter to us because people volunteered and wanted to raise and push this amongst their own circles of friends. That's how we've organized all through the Olympic period when no one was listening about pushing for the social commitments. This community continued. And today, when we get on the trains with our trekkers, Sean Millar from the Portland Hotel Society, Dave Murray from the Carnegie Community Action Project, Diana Hart from the Purple Thistle Center, We have a couple of people going from the Lookout Emergency Aid Shelter, and I'm forgetting a couple of people as well. But once we get on the trains, we're going to be discussing what we do in Toronto and Ottawa. We have meetings set up with housing organizations, and you see the red tents that were donated to us from the Pivot Legal Society. We're going to be leaving them with housing groups in Toronto, and we're going to be taking more to Ottawa for the lawn of Parliament Hill. And so let the message be loud and clear from British Columbia Prime Minister Stephen Harper. Let it be loud and clear. Either you and your caucus support a national housing program, or we will throw you out of office. And when we get back from Ottawa, hold the fort, because the fight goes on. Thank you.